Hey everybody, I am Brian Gillooly and I'm delighted to have with me today the CIO and Executive Vice President of FedEx, Rob Carter. He is our keynote and we'll be talking to him momentarily. But just as a bit of an introduction, Rob has been with FedEx for 25 years. He's been the CIO for 20 years. I've actually had the good fortune of being a friend of Rob's for all 20 of those years. So it's been interesting. We've had a lot of good conversations. Rob is well known in the industry as one of the quintessential CIOs, actually. He is a Fortune Magazine Executive of the Year, Information Week's Chief of the Year. He also won our Decade Award winner. He is just the epitome of CIO. So please welcome Rob Carter.
Thanks, Brian. Great to be here with you. Although it's always more fun when we're doing this in like Las Vegas or in Scottsdale, Arizona, or something, playing golf. But these are interesting times, right? But it's a real pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and speaking of interesting times, so I introduced you with all those plaudits and whatnot. But have you ever experienced anything that's been more challenging to IT leadership than what we're going through right now?
9/11 was really interesting, and I still remember the cover of Information Week at that point in time. All of the companies that were responding in unique ways to a unique set of circumstances. That's the only thing that pops into my head that was, so dramatic and so fast, and really had kind of a big impact on the way we were operating at that point in time. But this is clearly unique. This is a unique time for all of us, and it has been a huge challenge for our business, for the technology, and for the world.
Were there any sort of surprises that impacted FedEx's culture or your department in particular? Any challenges or bright spots?
Yeah, super interesting question. Well, we sent 105,000 people home around the world basically in 2 days. It was an incredible move for us from a cultural standpoint to take all of our team members that have seated jobs that didn't have to be in the office and move them to their work from home environments. That was true around the world, not just in Memphis, Tennessee, or in the States, but everywhere that we operate. And in contrast to that, we had hundreds of thousands of our team members that were out there, literally in harm's way, operating the business, making the critical deliveries that FedEx makes every day, delivering PPE around the world. We've delivered over 1 billion masks to different parts of the world throughout the pandemic. But culturally, there have been some great surprises, frankly. The effectiveness of these tools. Zoom in particular has been really useful to us, but we use Teams and WebEx and the whole array of tools that have become really important. Frankly, Teams is really great for us as the teams within our firewalls work together. But just yesterday, I ran a global town hall for our global all management organization, and that was incredible, not just because we're able to do it, but because it's so effective. We've been doing it every month since the pandemic started, and our team feels like we've been communicating really well throughout this, and these formats do a really nice job of letting us do things that frankly we weren't doing before the pandemic struck.
And you mentioned this gigantic global organization, and in a lot of ways, you could look at that and say that was particularly challenging, being a company of that size with that kind of scope and different standards within different countries and other geographies. But was it more of a challenge because of your global nature, or actually was it a benefit because you already had some standards in place that enabled you to respond quicker?
Yeah, that's a really terrific and insightful question. Because we had really learned to operate on a global nature and a global basis, we didn't want people in planes all the time, coming to meetings. So we had a really robust set of connectivity tools. We had, for example, our customer service teams. Many of our customer service team members were already working from home. We had started several years ago with pilots of saying, hey, how would this work if our customer service team members were working from home. And so we had many that were already down that path. We had a lot that were still sitting in centers that we emptied out and allowed them to work from home. But you're right, though. We had a pretty good framework. For example, we already had a Zoom contract. We already had Teams rolled out and in place. We already had those things in place before the pandemic broke out, and it was a significant advantage.
And actually, have you been able to help any of your customers as well with some of your best practices? Do you have any sort of knowledge transfer that you do?
Well, really importantly, it wasn't so much about work from home that allowed us to respond to our customers' needs. It was about the work we had been doing to prepare for, in particular, the e-commerce revolution. We had spent a lot of time and energy building out robust tools and flexible tools that would allow retailers and consumers alike to interact in a very effective way in the e-commerce world. And so once the pandemic hit, the surge of e-commerce across, you've seen in the news the earnings releases from some of the big retailers are actually quite strong, those that were prepared and able to respond with an e-commerce set of solutions. So we had been building for a long time a critical set of capabilities to support e-commerce, particularly for big retailers and CPGs. And what really happened though is we got slingshotted into 2023. All of a sudden, this thing that we saw coming and were preparing for just came, up close and personal. And frankly, you couldn't fake it, whether or not you were prepared for that at that point in time. The tools that we had built came under tremendous stress and utilization, but they've held up, and it's been kind of crazy, especially in that business to consumer space, which was not our core business a few years ago. We were predominantly a B2B player, and the evolution had certainly begun where we were doing a lot more B2C, and we were preparing for that. But as the pandemic hit, it was an onslaught.
I mean, the description you just gave just underscores how important FedEx is in that entire supply chain or process chain, I guess, in keeping things moving and as best as possible throughout this. So you mentioned a bunch of technology initiatives, and you said, very interestingly, slingshotting into 2023. Let's talk a little bit now about some of the specific technology projects that have been impacted by this, I guess. And if we could start, let's talk about your Renewal program. Tell us a little bit about that. It's been going on for 10 years, I believe, and you're kind of winding that down now. Talk a little bit about that and how it's been impacted by this.
Well, Renewal has been a 10-year journey for us, but it started on the basis of, we have a technology DNA at FedEx. We started a long time ago building and deploying technology like tracking systems and so many things. And frankly, from the late 70s and early 80s when these technologies started rolling out in earnest to where we are today, wave after wave after wave of technology had sort of, rolled onto the beach, and we had a lot. We had a lot of different technologies. You would have to, in some ways, especially if you add into that the acquisitions that we had made over time, bolting those in, you would have to call it something of an accidental architecture. It was a productive and useful set of systems and technology that we had, and the team members that built it were amazing because they were in all cases breaking ground, new ground, and plowing new paths. But ultimately that same thing that was of huge value in the past became legacy, and it became a challenge for us, and the Renewal journey was really all about trying to simplify and modernize that collection of things that we had accumulated and built over the years. And so it has been an unbelievable journey, but I can't tell you how glad we are we started when we did and really began to build out the core services and microservices that represent the less complex, more flexible, faster to market capabilities that we have today.
So what's the lesson then for Interop attendees, I guess, in terms of this program and having, I mean, it's very unusual to have a 10-year kind of time frame for IT projects. And I know it wasn't just one, it's many things. But what's the message for Interop attendees about planning and being able to prepare for new technologies that come in along the way, like cloud and AI and blockchain and all that you've actually taken on very strongly?
Yeah, there's a lot to that question and a lot to unpack, but most of what it was taking a really clear-eyed look at what we had and then creating a clear mental model and architecture for what we wanted to become. So in the journey between the two was clearly going to be very difficult. So along the way, we knew we would be making shifts, but there are two things I would say. One is understanding the principles of dominant design. So when you look at the technology footprint that you have today, let's just call out mainframes, for example. The probability that a new startup who might be a competitor of yours coming into the marketplace with a digital footprint would go out and buy mainframe computers and build technology to sit on that, and even for that matter, build their own data centers to run them in, the probability of that is close to zero. And so what that means is that's not dominant design technology. Dominant design technology is really where the industry aligns over time, whether it's the common gauge of the railroad or the way that airplanes are built today. So many things went through lots of different variations when they were new and early and nascent in their journey. But then ultimately a dominant design settles in, and that becomes the roadway for the future. We recognized that the technologies that we had were not on the dominant design. They weren't on the common gauge of a cloud-enabled modern technology world. And so it was super important to say, if we stay here where we are, as opposed to moving and going forward, we're actually creating significant risk for the business. Towns that decided that they wouldn't switch to the new modern gauge of the railroad became ghost towns with tumbleweeds rolling down Main Street. You have to be on the common gauge of the railroad. You have to be able to, in this world in particular, interact with your customers and with your providers and with those merchants out there in a common language. And that's what we were shooting for as we built out the Renewal framework over the course of this last decade.
So it's a foundation that enables you to be prepared for new technologies that come along, and you're not caught off guard. I think that's pretty significant. And we'll talk in a moment a little bit about you and your career as well. I have a feeling that being in the position for 20 years probably helps with continuity and establishing some of those standard processes and technologies.
Yeah, having the same CEO really helps too. I've worked for Fred Smith, who's also the founder of our company and still chairman and CEO today. And, he's essentially an information architect. He's the one that dreamed up the model of package tracking and the fact that the information about the package was as important as the package itself. He said that way back in 1979 before I was anywhere close to FedEx at that point in time. So, having a boss, working for a founder CEO that totally gets it, is probably our secret weapon, other than our culture, which, has a real sense of purpose to it.
So let me go back to that comment you made about slingshotting into 2023. Is the implication that there are some projects that have been accelerated at FedEx, some IT projects?
I could certainly say that, and yes, I think we've been able to shift quickly, but one of the most important things that I think all FedExers are proud of right now is that the strategy that we were working towards. I mean, we had expanded our delivery networks to 7 days. We had flexibly built out retail locations all over the world where you could do business with FedEx and redirect your package or put a package. We had built out a set of capabilities that was expectant of this kind of change coming at us. It just showed up sooner than we ever expected. Now, were we nervous? Is it a huge challenge for us as we're, in what we call peak-like volumes? Our business has always had these incredible surges around the holidays, particularly in this kind of traffic. And so as we were preparing for peak seasons, which often double and even sometimes triple the amount of volume that we would see in these cohorts, that may have been sort of the saving grace for us. It's just that peak arrived in March with the pandemic and it hasn't stopped. Now, normally we have a lot of time to prepare for it and, kind of batten the hatches and make sure all the infrastructure is up to snuff. This time it just happened, but we've fared well, and I'm really proud of the team. But all of this while working from home, by the way, here over the last several months, and wow, that's just another surprise. The productivity and ability of the team. I'm not positive it's sustainable for indefinitely here for sure. But the way our teams have responded, not just the IT teams, but the marketing teams, the finance teams, the customer contact teams, and sales, all doing an incredible job keeping our customers, in business and doing what they need. But that's that sense of purpose that we have, that we matter in the world, we matter to these businesses, and we certainly matter to the people that are receiving, both critical and non-critical things at their homes just to make their lives sustainable during this
Yep.
period of time.
Yeah, it's a great testimonial to people's ability to adapt and do all this, like you said, from home. Although I think I'm hearing you saying don't get too comfortable because we definitely have stuff to do when we get back to the office. But I mentioned blockchain before and AI and that sort of stuff. FedEx has always been at the forefront of technology innovations, if not always the first, certainly one of the companies that latches onto technology and really gets to the heart and value of that technology. Are there any technologies right now that you're looking at as an IT leader that you feel has terrific promise that you'd like to share with the Interop attendees?
Yeah, I think there are several. When one of the most important things that's going on, and it's part of the AI ML world, but it's really a little bit different, is the Internet of Things, IoT. We've been very busy over the last couple of years building out what we call sensor-based logistics, the embedding of sensors into critical shipments, and obviously the criticality of the shipment today, it may be what warrants a sensor being embedded that allows you to actively track that shipment throughout its journey. But like all things, including the tracking systems that we built back in the 80s, it sort of devolves down through the supply chain to where we expect that virtually everything moving in supply chains will have embedded sensors over time. We're rolling out our SenseAware ID technology right now for some of our most critical packages. It's a Bluetooth low energy, lightweight sensor that can be embedded on a shipment. All of our vehicles in the express network, all of our facilities, all of our aircraft are all embedded with readers that allow us to keep track of these Bluetooth devices. And it's just the next generation of tracking. And, that's just one example of IoT and sensor-based logistics. We're also doing a lot of work with autonomy right now. We've been pretty public about our Roxo delivery bot. We've been working with Dean Kamen at DECA for the last period of time to introduce a new delivery bot that's particularly good at things like same day, sort of dispatched neighborhood deliveries. For us, when we think about a 3,000-pound vehicle delivering a 3-pound pizza, and all the footprint that it takes, it doesn't make sense to us. And so we've got real opportunity with Roxo and the same day bot to revolutionize that industry for a lot of our customers that really want to be able to dispatch into neighborhoods in a very cost effective and environmentally effective way. We're also dealing with autonomy inside of our facilities. We've got tuggers that move around the facilities and move things to different parts of the sort, or there's so many things moving through the e-commerce channels today that we call oversized. That's a trampoline or a kayak or something, and they're they're kind of hard to get through the system, but we have some autonomous tuggers that are able to take those things where they need to go. We've got a lot of RFID working right now in our enormous FedEx freight facilities as part of our really changing an industry for freight. What we're doing in autonomy there is incredible. And I'll finish with blockchain. You mentioned blockchain. We actually think blockchain is really important. I realize that the hype cycle, might have diminished a little bit right now, but we've continued to invest in blockchain. We're charter members of the Blockchain Research Institute. We're also charter members of the Blockchain and Transportation Alliance, where there are many companies now that are working on blockchain standards. Because let's think about critical medicines coming, across borders, or the things that are going on right now. It's so important to know the provenance of those kinds of products. So whether it's a high value, designer item, coming from Louis Vuitton, or whether it's a pharma item, coming in that you want to be able to guarantee its authenticity. We believe blockchains are really good at that kind of provenance and custodial chain. We are kind of the inventors of custody chains with our tracking systems back in the day, but our custody chains only go from the time we pick the package up to when we deliver it. We think the custody chains of the future actually go well beyond that, from the point of manufacture to the point of consumption, and blockchain's a really useful tool for that.
I mean, all that's so fascinating. And oh my God, does it totally underscore what Fred Smith said back in 1979 about the data about the package being more important and valuable than the package itself. I mean, just really underscores all that. So let me talk a little bit now about your role as a CIO and some advice you might have for the Interop attendees. I mentioned at the top of our conversation that you've been the CIO for 20 plus years, I believe. How much does culture and understanding culture and managing culture help you as a CIO to be successful in technology leadership?
Yeah, we're kind of fanatics about culture at FedEx. We believe in very intentionally managing culture. The opportunity that you have to connect with your team members and across the business is so important. But one of the most important things for CIOs and for all technology leaders and the management teams out there is that I don't think in general we've done a great job about being in partnership with the business. A lot of times we're frankly even too subservient. We call the business our customers. I don't allow our team to call the business our customers. We are partners in this journey, and we have to enter into that relationship as equals, as partners. And so the advantage that I've had working directly for Fred Smith, I'm one of the most senior members of his team now. Right. Is that we do get a seat at the table. We do get that opportunity to interact with the business. But I've said for many years, you've probably heard me say it, that over the nearly 40 years that I've been doing information technology work now, I've really only learned one thing, and that one thing is that when the business and technology teams are working together in a trusted relationship and they're marching towards the same goals and pulling together, then my job becomes the easiest job in the world. All I have to do is get out of the way and watch great things happen. But conversely, and all too often is the case, when business and IT are at odds and pointing fingers and blaming and, then it's an insult to glaciers to say that things move at glacial speed. They are diametrically opposed things. And so I've learned to run at those situations like the sound of gunfire, ride to the sound of the gunfire. When that trusted relationship isn't there, and when our leaders on both sides of the aisle, business and IT, have figured out how to, not see the world through, critical trust lens and KPIs that matter and point to success and managing demand and managing the results, then you have a problem on your hands.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, this is a conversation we all in the IT industry have been having for many, many years. But I guess the point is it's going to always be an ongoing conversation because the situation is always so fluid.
Yeah, it's hard, I mean, and again, I say it's the one thing I've learned, and, it act like it's simple. It's not simple at all. But, a lot of times we also have this, this kind of, playing our cards a little close, close to the vest. And, I've spent many, many years trying to educate my business partners on why what we do is hard, or why it's complex, or what the backdrop of that complexity. The very beginning of the renewal journey was this view that I created for the business that I called an ugly picture. It was a rational rose, map of all of the systems and all of the interfaces at FedEx. And at the time, it was kind of fresh off the heels of Katrina. Fred named it Hurricane Rob because it
I was
looked
going to
like
ask you about
a
that.
big hurricane spinning, but to me, that was a really important education point and tool for my business partners to say, if you wonder why it's slow and expensive, take a look at what the solve for is: mind-numbing complexity that has to be engineered out. And so that was what the journey of renewal was all about, was taking, a very clear-eyed look at where we were, what the current state was, and then painting a picture that they could, buy into, how we could change that dynamic and deliver more value for the business and create more reliability and be more secure, all of the above.
Well, let me finish up with one interesting question, I guess. We've got a wide variety of people who are attending Interop. There's IT managers and administrators, certainly there's CIOs and other C-level folks who've been in their organizations or their positions for anywhere from a few months to many years, like yourself. You're kind of an exception at 20 years. What is it that keeps Rob Carter coming to the office and getting excited about IT leadership and the IT industry every day?
Yeah, I think I'm a little parochial about that because I think our company is very cool. We have a stated purpose that we connect people and possibilities around the world, and through that, businesses prosper, communities flourish, and people thrive. And that sense of purpose kind of wells up within us, particularly at times like this, where, we're able to go out there and serve the world at a time of great need and critical need. That's always been true in the midst of, natural disasters and, and important relief efforts that we, always engage ourselves in. But it's as simple sometimes as just connecting parts of the world and the supply chains that are useful to not only advance the world that's, out at the edge being connected by making their access to the goods of the world, much, much easier, but also allowing the world to access what they've got. We think that those, people and possibilities are really important. But I also have, I'm a technologist at my core. I graduated from college in '81 with a computer science degree, and it's kind of my calling, Brian. I mean, it's just something that I enjoy, and I've loved being there through, what I consider the nascent era of, of integrated and full digital connections in the world today. I mean, if you think about 1980 to 2020, I mean, the journey has been spectacular, and anyone that would think that that would be boring, to have been a participant in that, just doesn't have the same calling that I do,
Yeah.
because it's been a rush.
No, that might be the key right there. So, Rob, thanks so much. We always learn so much when we get a chance to talk to you about FedEx, about the industry, about you, about all the great new technologies and processes that are coming down the road. So thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure, Brian. Thank you.
And thank you to everybody for joining us for this keynote conversation with Rob Carter, the Executive Vice President and CIO of FedEx. Again, we appreciate Rob's time, and I hope everybody else has a terrific Interop.